March 9, 1945. Mariana Islands, Pacific Ocean. Sunset approaches over American airfields on Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. On runways stretching across captured Japanese territory, ground crews perform final checks on 325 Boeing B-29 Superfortress bombers. Major General Curtis LeMay, commanding the 21st Bomber Command, has ordered the most radical change in bombing tactics of the Pacific War. In bomb bays packed beyond normal capacity, crews load cluster bombs containing 1,520 M69 incendiary bomblets per aircraft, each filled with napalm that will burn at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. The objective is strategic, yet controversial: the densely populated Shitamachi district of Tokyo, where 750,000 people live in wooden homes packed into just 12 square miles. At 17:35 hours, the first silver B-29 lifts off from Guam's North Field. Through the gathering darkness comes the roar of Wright R-3550 engines as bomber after bomber takes to the skies, flying individually rather than in formation, stripped of most defensive guns to carry double their normal incendiary load. Leading the attack are Pathfinder aircraft that will mark the target with a burning X visible from miles away, followed by the main force dropping their loads from just 5,000 to 7,000 feet, a fraction of their designed bombing altitude. What unfolds next will demonstrate the overwhelming power of American incendiary warfare and reveal why Japanese air defenses, despite their determination, could not prevent history's most significant single air raid. The American Boeing B-29 Superfortress had arrived in the Pacific Theater as the most technologically advanced aircraft of World War II. This revolutionary bomber required over 1.4 million engineering man-hours to design and represented an investment of $3 billion, far exceeding the Manhattan Project's $1.9 billion cost. The four-engine heavy bomber incorporated groundbreaking features: pressurized crew compartments, remote-controlled gun turrets, and the most powerful piston engines ever fitted to an aircraft. Manufacturing was distributed across the nation, with Boeing producing bombers at Seattle, Renton, and Wichita, the Glenn L. Martin Company at Omaha, and Bell Aircraft Corporation at Marietta, Georgia. Each B-29 stretched 99 feet in length with a wingspan of 141 feet, powered by four Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone engines, producing 2,200 horsepower each. The aircraft could carry up to 20,000 pounds of bombs over a combat radius of 1,600 miles, flying at altitudes up to 31,850 feet with a maximum speed of 357 miles per hour. By March 1945, American factories had delivered approximately 2,000 B-29s to combat units, with production accelerating toward the eventual wartime total of 3,970 aircraft. This massive manufacturing effort demonstrated American industrial capabilities. Boeing's Wichita plant alone was producing 4.2 Superfortresses per working day. The 20th Air Force, commanded personally by General Henry Hap Arnold, had deployed these strategic bombers first from bases in China beginning in June 1944, then from the newly captured Mariana Islands starting November 17, 1944. The 21st Bomber Command operated 3 bombardment wings from the Marianas: the 73rd Bombardment Wing and 313th Bombardment Wing based on Saipan, and the 314th Bombardment Wing on Guam. These units could deploy over 300 B-29s for a single mission, each aircraft maintained by specialized ground crews working around the clock. Standing in stark contrast was Japan's air defense system by early 1945. The Imperial Japanese Army and Navy operated separate, uncoordinated command structures with minimal communication between services. Their primary night fighter, the Nakajima J-1N Gecko, Moonlight, had been hastily converted from a reconnaissance aircraft. Armed with twin 20mm Type 99 cannons firing upward at a 30-degree angle and another pair firing downward, the Gecko could theoretically attack bombers from unexpected angles. However, Japan had produced only 479 of these aircraft throughout the war, with many already lost. The Kawasaki Ki-45 Toryu Dragon Killer served as another night fighter option, equipped with a 37mm cannon in the nose and oblique-firing 20mm cannons, but only 1,701 had been manufactured since 1941. Without radar for night interception, these aircraft relied on searchlights and visual identification, nearly impossible tasks against fast-moving bombers in darkness. Ground-based defences were equally inadequate. Tokyo possessed fewer than 500 heavy anti-aircraft guns defending the entire metropolitan area. The Type 99 88mm gun provided the main high-altitude defence, while the Type 98 20mm cannon offered close-range protection with an effective ceiling of only 11,500 feet. Most critically, Japan lacked fire control radar for anti-aircraft artillery, depending instead on optical rangefinders and sound locators that became useless in poor weather or at night. The numbers told a challenging story. While America could deploy hundreds of B-29s from the Marianas alone, Japanese forces operated perhaps 200 operational night fighters throughout the home islands by March 1945. Fuel shortages restricted training flights, leaving new pilots with minimal night flying experience. Aviation gasoline had become so scarce that many aircraft were grounded to preserve fuel for defensive operations against the expected American invasion. Major General Curtis LeMay had assumed command of the 21st Bomber Command in January 1945, inheriting a strategic bombing campaign that had failed to achieve decisive results. Previous high-altitude precision bombing raids from 30,000 feet had proven ineffective due to the jet stream, winds exceeding 200 miles per hour that scattered bombs miles from their intended targets. Engine strain from climbing to altitude with heavy bomb loads caused frequent mechanical failures, with magnesium alloy components overheating beyond safe operating temperatures. Cloud cover obscured targets 70% of the time, forcing bombardiers to rely on primitive radar. After analysing these operational challenges, LeMay made a revolutionary decision that would transform the air war against Japan. The new tactics were radical yet logical. LeMay ordered all defensive guns removed except for tail positions, allowing each B-29 to carry 7 tons of incendiaries instead of the usual 3.5 tons of high explosives. Flying at 5,000 to 9,000 feet would avoid the jet stream, reduce engine strain, and improve bombing accuracy. Night attacks would minimize exposure to Japanese fighters, which lacked radar and trained night fighter pilots. Individual aircraft would navigate by LORAN radio signals, attacking in a continuous stream over several hours rather than concentrated formations. Weather forecasters predicted ideal conditions for March 9th to 10th, clear skies with strong surface winds that would spread fires across the target area. The target selection revealed the operation's strategic nature. American planners selected areas where Japanese cottage industries produced aircraft parts, electrical equipment and precision instruments in small workshops integrated within residential zones. Intelligence officers had consulted maps produced by the Office of Strategic Services, ranking Tokyo's wards by their infrastructure density, utilizing pre-war Japanese urban planning documents. The selected zone in northeastern Tokyo included the Asakusa, Honjo, and Fukagawa wards, working-class neighborhoods with extremely high population density, where extended families lived in wooden structures separated by narrow alleys. The M69 incendiary bomblet represented advanced warfare technology. This hexagonal steel pipe measured 3 inches in diameter and 20 inches long, weighing 6 pounds. Unlike earlier thermite or magnesium designs that burned hotter but could be extinguished, the M69 used napalm, jellied gasoline developed by Standard Oil and Harvard University scientists. Dropped-in E-46 aimable clusters of 38 bomblets that separated at 2,000 feet altitude, each M69 deployed a cotton streamer to orient its fuse downward. Upon impact, a time delay fuse burned for 3 to 5 seconds, before a white phosphorus charge ignited, dispersing flaming napalm up to 100 feet in multiple directions. The delayed action ensured the weapon would be lying on its side when it detonated, maximizing the spread of incendiary material through buildings. Testing at Dugway Proving Ground in Utah had proven the M69's effectiveness against replica Japanese residential structures. The weapon created multiple ignition points across wide areas, with napalm that adhered to surfaces and resisted water-based firefighting efforts. A single B-29 carried 40 cluster bombs containing 1,520 individual bomblets. With 279 bombers ultimately reaching the target from the 325 launched, Operation Meetinghouse would drop approximately 424,000 incendiary bomblets on Tokyo, creating an unprecedented concentration of incendiary devices. American planners calculated this density would create a self-sustaining conflagration where separate fires would merge, generating powerful wind currents that would spread the inferno beyond the initial impact zone. The first B-29 lifted off from Guam just after 5:30 p.m. on March 9th, piloted by the mission commander, Brigadier General Thomas Sarsfield Power of the 314th Bombardment Wing. Over the next hours, bombers took off at 50-second intervals from 3 island bases. The 14-hour round trip would test both men and machines to their operational limits. Crews flew in lighter flight gear instead of heavy suits, taking advantage of the lower altitude's warmer temperatures. Without the weight of guns, gunners, and ammunition, the B-29s climbed efficiently, conserving fuel during the 1,500-mile journey to Japan. As they approached the Japanese coast, Mount Fuji's snow-capped peak served as a prominent navigation checkpoint. Air raid sirens sounded in Tokyo around 10:30 p.m., though most inhabitants initially remained in their homes. Previous high-altitude raids had caused limited damage, creating widespread complacency. Tokyo's civil defense preparations proved inadequate for what was approaching. The city had only 18 concrete air raid shelters capable of protecting 90,000 people out of 4.3 million residents. Most families relied on bokugo, shallow trenches covered with boards or simple dugouts that offered minimal protection against incendiaries. The city's 8,000 firefighters possessed mainly hand pumps and bucket brigades designed for peacetime emergencies. Neighborhood associations had organized civilian firefighting groups, consisting primarily of elderly residents, women, and teenagers, equipped with sand buckets and water containers. The first Pathfinder B-29s arrived over Tokyo at 12:08 a.m. on March 10th, approaching from different directions to mark the target zone. Flying at just 5,000 feet, they dropped M47 napalm bombs that immediately created visible fire markers, forming an enormous burning X. The main force arrived minutes later, with bombardiers aiming for the illuminated marker. Weather conditions proved significant for the operation. Clear visibility with surface winds between 17 and 28 miles per hour, though gusts reached up to 45 miles per hour. As the M69 clusters separated and descended, observers described them as metallic objects glinting in the firelight, a sight that preceded unprecedented urban destruction. Within minutes, thousands of individual fires erupted across the target zone. The strong winds quickly spread flames from building to building, merging separate blazes into a massive conflagration. Temperatures at ground level exceeded 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, sufficient to melt glass and metal infrastructure. The superheated air created powerful updrafts, generating intense wind vortices that lifted debris high into the air. Streets became impassable as asphalt ignited, and wooden buildings collapsed from the extreme heat. The sound of the inferno overwhelmed all other noise, while smoke and heat reduced visibility to mere feet. 24-year-old Yoshiko Hashimoto was at home in Tokyo's Sumida district with her 13-month-old baby when the attack began. Her husband, an army officer, was on guard duty across the city. She would later provide testimony for historical records. The B-29s were dropping numerous firebombs, and it sounded like heavy rain. I was astounded to see the intensity of the air raid. I had never seen one before. As fires spread rapidly, Yoshiko fled with her parents, baby and sisters through streets filled with evacuating residents. The narrow alleys of Shitamachi became extremely dangerous as thousands attempted to escape simultaneously. Parents became separated from children in the confusion. Elderly residents who fell were unable to continue. Firefighting brigades abandoned their equipment when temperatures made it impossible to approach the flames. At the Sumida River, Yoshiko witnessed scenes of chaos. Burning debris was falling around us, and the wind was intensifying. Burning materials, signboards, wooden doors, and household items were airborne. Warehouses on both riverbanks were engulfed in flames. Her father pushed her and the baby into the water, an action that saved their lives, but her mother perished along with Yoshiko's father and sister Etsuko. Across the burning district, similar tragedies occurred repeatedly. Those who entered canals faced extreme water temperatures. Others were overwhelmed in the rush as thousands tried to reach water simultaneously. The conflagration's winds were powerful enough to move people significant distances, while some were found far from their original locations. Police stations, hospitals, and designated evacuation centers became surrounded by flames. At Kikukawa Elementary School, a designated shelter, investigators later found only metal objects and remains among the ashes where hundreds had sought safety. Buddhist temples that had existed for centuries were destroyed, along with those who had sought shelter there. The extreme conditions created by the inferno meant that even those in shelters faced severe challenges from heat and smoke. The superheated air caused severe respiratory damage to those exposed even briefly. Following the raid, casualty estimates varied significantly among different authorities. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey calculated 87,793 fatalities and 40,918 injuries. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department reported 83,793 deaths and 40,918 wounded. The Tokyo Fire Department estimated 97,000 killed and 125,000 wounded. Historical consensus indicates that over 100,000 people died, exceeding the immediate casualties from either atomic bombing. The attack destroyed 267,171 buildings across 15.8 square miles, eliminating 25% of Tokyo's structures. Over 1 million survivors lost their homes. The industrial impact was severe. More than half of Tokyo's manufacturing occurred in small workshops within residential areas, and their destruction significantly impacted production of essential war materials. Thousands of skilled workers were lost or displaced from the city. American losses were comparatively minimal. 14 B-29s failed to return, with 96 airmen listed as killed or missing. Several bombers encountered severe turbulence from thermal updrafts created by the fires, causing loss of control. Others received anti-aircraft damage during their low-level runs, though Japanese gunners struggled to track aircraft at such unusual altitudes. Aircrew members later reported detecting smoke even at their operational altitude. Crews who had initially questioned LeMay's tactics were sobered by the operation's scale and impact. General LeMay later reflected on the moral implications. "I suppose if I had lost the war, I would have been tried as a war criminal." General Arnold sent congratulations. "This shows your crews have the guts for anything." The operation's impact immediately influenced American strategy. Within 10 days, similar raids struck Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe, affecting Japan's 4 largest cities. The campaign then paused only because the 21st Bomber Command had exhausted its incendiary bomb supply. Production immediately increased, with American factories prioritizing M69 manufacturing. The contrast between American and Japanese capabilities had reached its maximum disparity. While the United States could replace lost B-29s within weeks, Japan could not rebuild its destroyed urban areas or replace lost workers. American industrial production exceeded Japan's by a factor of 10, while technical advantages made each American weapon significantly more effective. The B-29 program's $3 billion cost exceeded Japan's entire 1945 military budget. While America produced 50,000 tons of incendiary bombs monthly by mid-1945, Japan struggled to maintain basic ammunition supplies. The methodical nature of American operations reflected a scientific approach to warfare. The Chemical Warfare Service had constructed detailed replicas of Japanese neighborhoods at Dugway Proving Ground using pre-war architectural plans. Standard Oil Development Company created napalm through extensive chemical research. Harvard and the University of Chicago contributed analytical studies on fire propagation patterns. This integration of scientific research with military operations contrasted with Japanese military doctrine that emphasized traditional values over material considerations, an approach that proved inadequate against modern warfare methods. Japan's inability to develop effective countermeasures demonstrated strategic limitations. Despite the February 25 preliminary raid that destroyed 28,000 buildings, authorities made minimal improvements to fire defenses. Proposals to create fire breaks by demolishing buildings were not implemented. Evacuation plans remained largely theoretical. Military authorities insisted civilians maintain their positions, even as intelligence indicated massive incendiary raids were planned. This situation resulted from inter-service coordination failures and leadership constraints. The Japanese night fighter forces' limited effectiveness exposed the technical disparity. Pilots like Lieutenant Sachio Endo achieved individual successes. He was credited with 8 B-29 interceptions, but these were exceptional cases. Most night fighter pilots could not locate targets in darkness, especially once smoke obscured visibility. Without airborne radar, pilots depended on ground controllers using acoustic detection, methods that became ineffective once fires started. The few pilots who intercepted B-29s found their 20mm cannons often insufficient against the bomber's robust construction, unless they achieved critical hits on engines or fuel systems. Some pilots attempted ramming attacks, sacrificing themselves for single bomber kills. Tokyo's fire department exemplified Japan's infrastructural limitations. The city operated 286 fire engines, mostly manual pump units requiring multiple operators. Water pressure was insufficient for large-scale firefighting, while infrastructure damage compromised the water distribution system. Fire department procedures emphasized protecting individual structures through traditional methods, approaches inadequate against thousands of simultaneous ignition points. When the conflagration began, most fire companies were overwhelmed rapidly, their equipment destroyed and personnel forced to evacuate. The psychological impact on survivors was profound and lasting. Many described feeling that traditional protection systems had failed. Refugees departing Tokyo spread accounts throughout Japan, their experiences contradicting official information about the war situation. Worker attendance at factories declined significantly as civilians lost confidence. The term routine air raid entered common usage as cities were systematically targeted. By August 1945, 66 Japanese cities had experienced major incendiary attacks, with much of urban Japan severely damaged before the atomic bombings occurred. The operation's success influenced American planning for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan. Military planners calculated that continued incendiary raids would eliminate remaining industrial capacity by October. LeMay believed that strategic bombing alone might compel surrender without requiring invasion. Joint Chiefs of Staff estimates indicated that conventional bombing had already caused approximately 900,000 civilian casualties and would cause millions more if the conflict continued. These assessments influenced President Truman's decision regarding atomic weapons, viewing them not as alternatives to conventional bombing, but as potentially decisive psychological weapons. The human dimension transcended national boundaries. American air crews carried psychological burdens for years, processing their role in the operation despite wartime context. Richard Bale of the 9th Bombardment Group could observe the fires clearly from his aircraft, an image that remained with him. Japanese survivors lived with lasting physical and emotional effects. Families on both sides experienced irreplaceable losses that affected multiple generations. The raid created numerous orphans and widows, overwhelming social support systems and contributing to post-war challenges. Recovery efforts revealed the comprehensive nature of the destruction. Medical facilities in the target area were eliminated, along with educational institutions, religious buildings, and administrative centres. The morning of March 10th revealed a transformed landscape where eastern Tokyo had existed. Only concrete and brick structures remained standing across miles of ash-covered ground. Survivors searched through unrecognizable areas for landmarks that no longer existed. Recovery teams required heavy equipment to clear areas. Many victims could not be identified. Mass funeral services continued for weeks. Waterways remained blocked with debris for extended periods. The industrial impact exceeded initial projections. Tokyo's eastern districts contained thousands of small workshops where families produced specialized components: precision instruments, electrical components, mechanical fittings. Their elimination disrupted supply chains, supporting major factories. The loss of experienced craftsmen, machinists, and technical specialists who required years of training proved irreplaceable. Worker productivity in surviving facilities declined as employees dealt with personal losses, housing challenges, and diminished morale. The campaign's expansion proceeded systematically. After replenishing incendiary supplies, operations resumed in May with refined techniques achieving greater efficiency. By July, B-29s were distributing warning leaflets before raids, informing civilians which cities were targeted next. Psychological operations demonstrating complete air superiority. These missions became routine operations, with some encountering minimal opposition. Japanese defensive capabilities progressively weakened as experienced pilots were lost, ammunition depleted, and civil defense systems collapsed. International legal considerations remain subjects of historical debate. The 1907 Hague Convention addressed bombardment of undefended cities, but interpretations of defended and military targets proved complex. Post-war tribunals prosecuted certain leaders for civilian targeting, but did not address Allied bombing campaigns. The precedent established that military necessity could justify civilian area impacts influenced subsequent international humanitarian law development, despite advances in precision weapons technology. Weather conditions' role in amplifying the operation's effects demonstrated American utilization of environmental factors. The March 9th to 10th raid was deliberately scheduled for predicted strong winds following a dry period. Meteorologists analyzed Japanese weather patterns extensively, identifying optimal conditions for fire spread. The varying wind speeds that night, between 17 and 45 miles per hour depending on location, exceeded some predictions. This integration of meteorological science with military planning exemplified American operational approaches. Individual B-29 crews experienced the mission differently than planners anticipated. Many were affected by observing the scale of destruction below. Aircrew members reported that smoke and atmospheric disturbance were detectable at operational altitudes. Pilots managed aircraft through severe turbulence created by thermal conditions. Some crew members later requested different assignments, struggling to reconcile their participation with personal values. Others focused on the strategic objective of ending the conflict quickly. Japanese military response revealed command and control limitations. Anti-aircraft units engaged continuously but achieved limited success in darkness and smoke. Fighter squadrons launched 90 sorties but accomplished scattered interceptions. Fire department leadership received insufficient warning about the raid's scale. Military authorities prioritized protecting government and military facilities, while civilian areas burned. Communications failed as infrastructure was destroyed, and messengers could not traverse affected areas. Post-war memorialization reflects evolving historical perspectives. Unlike Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which gained international recognition, Tokyo's firebombing remained less widely known outside Japan.